got some lights in here. All these nice people are.
Please welcome back Gary Marcuse and Betsy Carson as well. Congratulations.
It's really a heartening response, and I will convey it to our pals in Beijing and Yunnan province as well. I wanted to recognize some people who worked on it. This is the premiere, so we get to do a little bit of that. We'll take about 30 seconds to do that. But first, I just wanted to read you a short statement from Sheila Hong, who's living in Beijing right now with her 5-month-old daughter. You may have noticed she was working on that while we were working with her. She was a reluctant central character in this. She really wanted to guide us to all the other activists, but of course, being filmmakers, we kind of roped her into the middle of it. And she sent us this note. I asked her what she would like to say. She said, as an environmental filmmaker, I've always believed that documentary films have the power to promote environmental and social changes, and I'm proud that I've practiced what I have believed. She said, when I first joined Wang Yong Chen's trip to the New River in early 2004, I didn't know that I would be back to this area for so many times in the following 5 years, and that I'd become so deeply involved with the fate of the 2 biggest rivers in China, and over 150,000 people who would be resettled by dams to be built on these 2 rivers. Neither did I expect that my best friend, anthropologist Zhao Yongjun, would have died at such a young age of 33 for the cause of saving Tiger Leaping Gorge, or that I myself would be followed and questioned by plainclothes police when interviewing Jiaoshaoba villagers who have lost their houses and land to make way for the dam. These are all worthwhile, however, since I have witnessed myself how people, after seeing my film, were touched and motivated to stand up and save their homeland. I think this is the best reward for a filmmaker. And I'd like to thank Gary Marcuse and Betsy Carson for having used my footage and brought this most important issue to the attention of an international audience. Your care would help and support us to save the 2 biggest rivers in China and its peoples. It's Sheila Hong. I'd like to just to give a little shout out and a ni hao to some of our people who worked on this. I'll have them all stand up, save your applause, then we can do it all at once. Translator over here, Yang Ching. Is Teresa Ho here tonight as well? We also have with us Assistant Editor Neil Thompson, Researcher Paula Sawatsky, our legal department, Brown Martz. We have 2 of our designers here, Mike Deddy and Selina Yi from Drive Design. Stand up, guys, and everybody take it. And Rolf Katz, our DOP, is here tonight as well. I'd be happy to hear some comments, questions, remarks. And I guess we have a few minutes to do this.
Yeah, we've got lots of time.
Right at the back, somebody standing up.
Okay. Today I got a phone call from the Council of Canadians, and they're asking for our help because they want to make what's happening in the Great Lakes an issue. It's the water source for probably 1 million people. It's being polluted. There's a lot going on there, and they're asking us to contact them and organize, let people know they can become members and receive the news and network through the internet and through writing and their quarterly publication. And if you are low income, it doesn't matter. They just want people to be aware and vote. And the other thing I want to say is the election's coming up November 19th. Gregor Robertson wants to do as much ecological greening of this city as possible. And Adrian Carr is running for the Green Party as a council member. Those 2 people and the Vision Party are backing good environmental policies. So I ask for you to get involved with the election and vote for those people.
Thank you very much. Very much in the spirit tonight, Council of Canadians. Everybody was able to hear that? Okay. And if you do have a question in Mandarin, if you prefer to ask it, Yu Ching will also help us translate. Another, yes, here. Yes.
Gary, you know that China has some of the strongest human rights legislation of any country, and you know, you read their laws and you think, what's the problem? So I'm just wondering if, you know, how strong is those environmental laws? Aren't they just sort of, when the government chooses to allow them to be used, and you know, and then ignored at other times?
Question here is, how strong are these environmental laws? This is from a correspondent who has spent time there. And is it just a matter of the government deciding sometimes they will allow people their rights, sometimes not? Is that a fair?
Sure.
I think what we were, first of all, I think witnessing here is that it was a rather obscure little provision in a law about environmental impact assessment that unleashed this entire campaign. So I think that it's kind of a tribute to the, shall we say, the wiliness and the perspicacity of the environmentalists there, that they will take these openings to expand them as far as they can go. And frequently they said to me, there are cycles of openness and closed in China. This 2003 to 2008, you can see a whole series of reforms coming in about the environment. Quite a lot more public discussion, and kind of a door has been opened. It's very difficult to close when people start becoming educated. People inside the government clearly siding with the environmentalists to promote a lot of this kind of awareness. So that's one of the sort of the vectors within the government and in the culture. Mind you, when 2008 came along and there's a financial collapse, then the people who are more interested in constructing things gain a stronger hand over people who maybe want to preserve and protect. So we've certainly seen a kind of pulling back in that. But I think, I mean, I can't speak to the human rights issue as a whole. Of course, in China it's a very broad spectrum. But I thought it was really interesting the way in which developments in this area, which some people consider to be non-political, the environment, because everyone has a common interest, lead to other kinds of reforms in other areas as well. So I guess what I'm saying is I kind of trust the momentum, but I think that they have, of course, problems in China, as we do, with the continuing interest in enforcement of environmental laws. Does that get at what you're asking?
I hope you're right.
Thank you. I hope I'm right, too. Yes, next question. Yes.
Can you provide an update as to the village who...
State of the Dams, Joshua Village?
Who got the additional compensation?
Ah, yes.
What did they do with the millions of dollars? Because before...
Yes, $10 million, 700 million yuan. Sorry.
Yes.
$7 million, 100 million yuan. And my math seems to go off, but it is 7 million US. That was, of course, spread around the 7,500 people who were moved. And so how they're using this, I haven't been able to find out yet. I've been in touch with Yu Gang. This is a fairly recent development. I gather they're using it to get better land or to rebuild houses, a lot of debt.
Yeah, I was just curious because they said they spent the other compensation on just food.
On food, yeah. How much will this help? It's going to take a while to find out, I think. You may be wondering what this, several people have asked me what the status of the actual dam construction on these two big rivers. On the new river where that the villagers were who went on the bus. The dams, 13 dams were designed for that. This was then scaled back to 4. And then I was kind of crushed to see an announcement in the spring that all the dams are going to be built after all. This turned out to be a burst of enthusiasm by one of the power company people. And in fact, I hear now from Yu Gang that a new study is taking place because of questions raised by the environmental activists about the geological stability of the area. So they're going to spend about 5 years studying whether building a dam there might either result in the dam collapsing or creating earthquakes because of the size of the reservoir. So that whole thing's been slowed down. I think a lot of credit goes to people who raised all the questions. There was an area that I didn't get into in here, but there were a lot of geologists that work with within the same activist group. Over on the Upper Yangtze River, 2 or 3 of the dams downstream from Tiger Leaping Gorge are being built, and some of them have been completed. They were in violation of various environmental laws, paid a fine, not a very large fine, and went right back to work again. So there's a certain amount of sort of flexibility. There is some fear that a new dam, a big reservoir will be needed to feed these dams, and that they may yet build another big dam further up above the valley, beyond where the protest was, up in almost into the Tibetan highlands, the Tibetan territory. So it's not over for these guys. They're still working on the problem. Next question. Yes.
Did you encounter any resistance in the creation of the film by any power plant companies or the Chinese government as filmmakers?
As filmmakers, did we encounter resistance from the dam builders and or from the Chinese government? The dam builders, we, as you can see, we did kind of finesse things a little bit by not ourselves going, or me going to any of the dam sites, because I kind of stick out and might draw a lot of heat. But as you can see, I didn't really have to go to the dam sites because Shulong had been there herself, and so we were able to work. She gave us access to her entire body of footage, 100 hours of material I brought back with me and was able to use to make this film. She just really turned over all of her research. It was a collaboration of that kind. The government, we were mindful of the fact that in order to get journalist visas, which we had to in order not to kind of endanger the contacts over there, we needed to be relatively official when we traveled around. And we would then have the pleasure of the company of a government representative. It's made us a little nervous, but what we discovered was that the official who accompanied us, a very senior official in the agency that deals with foreign journalists, turned out to be very interested in the environment, very supportive. He thinks that these environmental activists are national heroes. And he's not alone in the government. He's not a renegade for doing that. It's a thread that runs through a lot of people. And he actually enabled us and helped us get the interview with a senior government official here, Xu Ping, whom we've been approaching from several other angles, but we just really, so it was really quite remarkable. He was taking a lot of notes while we were in meetings and in discussions, and I was like, oh, what's he writing? What's he writing? So I asked him one day, so what? This is about halfway through the trip. I felt like, so what are you writing there? And when he got there, he said, oh, let me read some of this to you. He said, we have lost track of the true value of things. He said, only the farmers who work with the land understand the true value. And I thought, okay, this is not going to be a problem. In the end, he thanked me for having the opportunity to stand behind me while I made a film. Mind you, he hasn't seen everything in this film, of course. He saw all the interviews and so on. But I think that was a major surprise to me, was the degree to which within government, within the society, there's a lot of people now who couldn't express things. Maybe now they can. And I think that's part of where the rights lead to expression, and expression means that so on. It's kind of a snowball effect. Yes. I do.
Sir, are these federal power plants, are they not government control? And why is there such a discrepancy where this is cautiously done, but is?
Could you say that again?
Sure. Sorry. The hydro companies, are they not?
The hydro companies.
Are they not government control?
The hydro companies, starting in the late 90s, they started privatizing a lot of natural resources and corporations and so on. And the hydro companies, in this case, Huaneng and Huadian, are enormous holding companies. They have resources all over China. And they're, I think, 51% government owned, but also largely in private holding. And they trade on the international stock exchanges and behave like corporations do. So that's, it's a new kind of world. In fact, the two big companies that kind of been given hunting rights, shall we say, in Yunnan province, which is why they came up with this idea for all the dams, just ahead of when the new legislation came in. So that's why there was this kind of dramatic struggle between the old way and then a newer way of doing things. That answer your question? Just wondering how is it? It's no longer just the government building these things. The government, as Xu Ping was telling me, the government's role now is often to try and mediate between the different groups, between the people and the corporations and the small companies, and because they don't control everything. There's a lot of economic clout. Yes.
Yeah, so I found the death of the activists kind of shocking and maybe suspicious even on the surface.
Mm.
So I'm wondering, like, I like the positive tone of the film a lot, and I'm wondering if was there any sort of suspicion of how, like, it was your intention to sort of focus on sort of positive.
Yeah. The question comes up often about Zhao Yongjun, the 33-year-old activist who died rather suddenly. I think everyone who knew him, he was this extraordinary guy who moved to Beijing, became a science senator, and then came home to his homeland because he loved it so much, and really endeared himself to all the journalists who came up there, and was the kind of the source of inspiration for. So he was kind of like a motor inside, an emotional motor inside this whole routine. So when he vanished, like almost overnight, people were deeply shocked, and still so years later when I went there. And I had to ask, well, what happened, really, what happened? And they came to the conclusion that, although they were shocked, they came to the conclusion that the family did, which is that he did die of exhaustion and a heart attack. So ultimately, there was no evidence of anything else. But it was just still hard to absorb, and I think you can see Sheila Hong's registering the shock of that. Yes?
Will the film be seen in China, or has
Will the film be seen in China? We're doing 4 things to try and figure this out. As you can know, we just finished. We've showed it, Sheila Hong has seen it, and we're now circulating it amongst all the other activists who are involved. We want their opinion on this. We're going to try entering film festival, Hangzhou Film Festival, if they'll take us, see what happens there. It seems like that may not be out of the question. We have contacts within CCTV, the big government broadcaster, and so we will talk to them. Ultimately, it will come down to the question of, can all of it be shown? Can some of it be shown? Can it be shown without little bits? And at that point, we're going to try and make a practical decision of going back to, if somebody says, okay, you can show it as long as the, let's say, farmers don't talk about getting guns or something like that. I mean, that might be kitschy, because that's about social unrest. So if they say, well, all except that, okay, then we'll have to say to our actors, so what do you think of this? Is this going to do more good by circulating without that particular journal? So we are going to make a Chinese version with Chinese subtitles on it, which we know as soon as it hits the ground out there, it will go viral. So I suspect that it will circulate. Yes?
I'm curious about the archival footage and how you got hold of it, and whether that footage is accessible to people in China.
My question about archival footage, yeah, it's accessible, and they use a lot of archival footage and a lot of documentaries for kind of talking heads and interviews. Very little observational stuff. But is that archival footage available in China? Well, some of it I think we've discovered for them, because we did a lot of research. Some of the footage you can buy from China Central News Agency bring a lot of money. If you want pictures of Chairman Mao, they're $7,000 a minute. But anybody.
Speaking about the sparrows.
The sparrows, no, that stuff has been shown. That story is fairly well known in China. Maybe nobody's used it as a kind of an environmental assessment of a revolution, but maybe some of the other people in the room who have grown up or lived in China can tell us more about how often they've seen it. There was a man who came up after the press screening and said, I lived during that period, and I did some of these things, but I've never seen any of the pictures. So we kind of looked around, and we found in a little television station in Kunming footage of filling in Lake Tiancha, and I don't think that's ever been broadcast before. So some of the stuff I think we are, in fact, exhibiting for the first time anywhere. Yes?
Is there a number or a total that anyone's gotten on the amount of people that have been displaced from this large-scale dam projects in China?
16 million people, referred to briefly by Zhao Yongjun.
I saw it in the film, I didn't know if that was the total was up.
That's my understanding, and it was reported by China Youth Daily. So, their conclusion was worse off. 80,000 dams in China, 20,000 big dams. They have half of the world's big dams. But the United States has 75,000 dams too, but just maybe not as many of them built in populated areas. So yeah, that's the number.
One more question.
Okay, one more, and then I just want to say something about how you guys, if you want to know how can you help them, I'd like to talk about that, yes.
When I was traveling in that area a few years ago, the conventional wisdom was you could speak for the environment as long as you didn't criticize the party. So if you criticize the party was when you got in trouble. The former Communist Party member seemed to come really close to that. And I think he was a former Communist Party member.
Sure, yeah, he was Communist Party since he was 17.
Has he been exposed to
You know,
house arrest or that type of thing since then?
everybody in China seems to know exactly what they can say and they can't say, and how they're protected and what level of all that. He's a little bit like a retired general, in my view, you know, that he has so much stature in China, and he's been expressing these kinds of opinions for a long time. And in fact, one of the vice ministers of the environment, a man named Pan Yu, has been way more critical about the pollution, water pollution, air pollution problems. I mean, he does sound like Al Gore, you know, in an angry mood at times. He's been a little bit quieter lately, but, you know, so he comes and goes. That was the lovely thing about him. I didn't expect Xi Jinping to be so humorous either about all this. And what perseverance for 40 years. What can we do to help this environmental movement in China? Well, we made the film, and we're Canada, and we made the film because we have public agencies and public broadcasters. This will show on the Nature of Things, a 45-minute version on December 1st. So we have this platform that allowed us to make this film. We need to circulate it. On our website, we are facetofacemedia.ca. There is a little section in our website about the movie that says take action. And it does tell you about Ma Jun has a website that helps pressure international corporations to put pressure on Chinese suppliers to clean up their act. And they've had some success with Walmart. He's been lately in the news criticizing Apple for not following through. I mean, there will be ways in which activists in North America can actually participate in some of the campaigns that are initiated by these guys. There's another thing you can do which is really directed tonight, and that is if you can vote this darn thing into some kind of recognition, that will help it circulate to other film festivals. That will help it go a little bit viral. So that's really, really important for these guys if we can do this, because we're giving it a real rousing kind of Vancouver send-off. So I hope you'll vote on the way out, because it's really important.
You mentioned the World Wildlife Fund, didn't you?
WWF is one of the supporters of this screening, and they certainly have been circulating information about it as well. And in fact, Xu Hong originally worked for them in China for a brief time before she made her film. So there are also going to be organizations like Dam and Oxfam and Conservation International and Greenpeace who do have offices there. But for the purpose of this film, I thought we'll just leave that aside and really concentrate on what these guys are. So, thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.